Your envelope, sir.
That was what Ryan Carter told his
What
mistress,
exactly is
laughing over a
this?
candlelit dinner while his loyal wife, Emily, waited at home, believing every lie he had ever told her. But 1 week later, in that very same restaurant, a waiter placed a thick envelope in front of him and whispered,
He's
"Sir,
hiding the
this is
assets, I
from your
know it. We
wife."
need to freeze
Inside that
everything
envelope
immediately.
was
I
the truth
understand.
Ryan
We
thought he
filed
had
the
buried
injunction.
forever.
He won't
This
be
story
able to move the
reminds us that
funds.
betrayal may break your heart, but self-respect can rebuild your entire life. This is a story about pain, dignity, and the quiet strength of a woman who chose freedom
just
over
listen to me. Let me
humiliation.
explain.
If this
There's
story
nothing
touches
left
you,
to discuss, David.
please
I
like,
need you to respect my
comment,
decision.
share,
It's over.
and subscribe to the channel so more people can hear stories like this. This content has been carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring meaningful value, life lessons, and emotional insight to our audience. She'll never find out. She's too busy being the perfect little wife. Ryan Carter laughed when he said it, sitting across from his mistress at a candlelit table, holding her hand as if the woman waiting at home did not exist. While Emily Carter sat alone in their house, he ordered the most expensive bottle on the menu and made promises he had no intention of keeping. Ryan believed he was untouchable. That was Friday night. 1 week later, in the same restaurant, a waiter walked up behind him, placed a thick envelope on the white tablecloth, and said quietly, "Sir, this is from your wife." Ryan Carter stopped breathing. If this story hits you tonight, subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment and tell us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now stay with me. Because Emily Carter was not the kind of woman who went looking for trouble. That was what people never understood about her. Not her friends, not her coworkers, and certainly not her husband. She believed the best in people until the evidence became too loud to ignore. Emily was organized, composed, deeply loyal, and, if she was honest with herself, a little too trusting for a woman who had spent 10 years married to Ryan Carter. 10 years. She used to say that number with pride at dinner parties and family gatherings, especially when younger couples asked her the secret. 10 years, and she would smile quietly and say, communication, honesty, showing up for each other every day. She believed every word. She had built her adult life around those words. So when the receipt fell out of Ryan's suit jacket on a Tuesday morning in October, Emily almost didn't pick it up. She was doing laundry. Ryan had already left for work. The house was quiet in that particular way it always was on weekday mornings. The kind of quiet that used to feel peaceful to her, that she used to stand in for just a moment before the day began. She had his charcoal gray suit in her arms, the one he'd worn on Friday night. And when she turned it inside out to check the pockets before she dropped it into the dry cleaning bag, the receipt fluttered out and landed face up on the hardwood floor. She almost didn't look at it. She picked it up the way you pick up any piece of paper that falls on your floor, automatically, without thinking. She was already moving toward the trash can in the kitchen when the numbers registered in her brain. She stopped walking. She looked down at the paper in her hand. 412 dinner for 2 Friday night at Maison, a French restaurant downtown that Emily had mentioned wanting to try for 2 years and that Ryan had consistently described as overpriced and pretentious every single time she brought it up. Her first thought, the thought she would later be almost ashamed of, was completely innocent. She thought maybe he was taking a client out. Maybe it was a business dinner and he forgot to expense it. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for why her husband had spent 412 at the most romantic restaurant in Dallas on a Friday night when he had told her he was stuck at the office until 10:00. She stood there in her kitchen holding that receipt, and she thought every generous, forgiving thing she could think of. Then she thought about Friday night. She had been on the couch when he came home. She had been watching television and waiting for him. And when he finally walked in at 10:15, she had asked him how the meeting went. She could hear his voice so clearly it was almost like he stood beside her. Long, exhausting. "I'm just glad it's over." He had kissed the top of her head, gone upstairs, and showered. He had showered the moment he came home from work. She had noticed that at the time and filed it away without knowing why. Now she knew why. Her hand was trembling slightly as she set the receipt down on the kitchen counter. She pressed her palms flat against the cool granite and she breathed in and out, in and out. She was not going to fall apart in her own kitchen at 7:30 in the morning over a restaurant receipt. She was not that woman. She had always prided herself on not being that woman. But the trembling didn't stop. She took out her phone, pulled up the restaurant menu, and stared at the prices. 2 appetizers, 2 entrees, 2 desserts, and a bottle of wine that cost more than 2 weeks of groceries. That was $412 at Maison. That was a dinner that took planning. That was a reservation made in advance. That was not a spontaneous business meeting that accidentally ended at an expensive French restaurant. Emily set her phone down very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands aren't entirely under your control. She picked up her dry cleaning. She finished the laundry. She went to work. She did not say a single word to anyone. That afternoon, Ryan called her at 2:00 the way he always did on Tuesdays. He asked how her day was going. He told her a mildly funny story about something that happened at a lunch meeting. He said he'd be home by 7 and asked if she wanted him to pick up Thai food on the way. She said sure. Thai food sounded great. She asked him how work was going. He said busy. He said they had a big account keeping him on his toes. She said she understood. She listened to his voice the entire time she was on the phone. Listened to it. She listened to his voice like she was studying it, looking for the place where the surface cracked and the performance showed through. She heard nothing. His voice was warm, easy, and completely natural. He sounded like a man with nothing to hide. Either she was wrong, or he was very good at this. When she hung up, she sat at her desk for 3 full minutes without moving. Then she opened her laptop and typed his email address into the recovery field. She knew his password. They had always shared passwords. Early in the marriage, it had felt like proof of trust. She had never used that trust to check on him. Not once in 10 years. She used it now. She opened his inbox, searched for Maison, and the thread appeared immediately. The reservation was in his name. Table for 2, Friday, October 3rd, 7:00 p.m. Window, table. Champagne on arrival. Champagne on arrival for a business meeting. Emily Essence went still on the keyboard. Below the reservation was another email confirming the champagne and rose petal arrangement. Rose petals. Her husband had ordered rose petals for a business dinner. She closed the laptop. She looked out at the Dallas skyline and breathed carefully. The way you breathe when you are trying not to make a sound in a place where you absolutely cannot make one. She did not cry. That surprised her. She had expected tears. Instead, something colder and more focused settled inside her. It felt like a door closing, like something soft becoming something harder. She thought, I need to know everything before I do anything. 1 week, she told herself. 1 week of watching before she made a move. She worked in marketing, so evidence mattered to her. You gathered it, checked it, confirmed it, then acted. She would treat this the same way, calmly, logically. But once you start looking for evidence, it has a cruel way of showing up fast. By Wednesday, she had found 2 more receipts, not in his suits, but in the recycling bin under his desk in the home office where he worked some evenings. One was from a hotel, the Adolphus, one of the oldest, most beautiful hotels in the city. The receipt showed 2 nights, one in September, one in August. She had not known about either of those nights. On both of those nights, Ryan had told her he was out with clients. By Thursday, she had found the second phone. She found it by accident, the way most people find the things they were never supposed to find. She had been looking for the car insurance documents in the filing cabinet in the home office when she pulled out a folder and the phone slid out from behind it and landed on the floor face up. It was a cheap prepaid phone, the kind people buy when they do not want anyone seeing their call history. It was locked, but a notification lit the screen while it was in her hand. A text from a contact saved simply as O said, "Miss you already." Then the phone buzzed again. Kenna stopped thinking about last night. Another message followed. When are you going to tell her? I am tired of waiting. Emily sat on the office floor and read those messages until the words stopped meaning anything. She sat there until she heard the sound of Ryan's car in the driveway. She put the phone back exactly where she found it. She put the folder back exactly how it was. She walked to the kitchen and she started making dinner. When Ryan walked in 2 minutes later, she turned around from the stove and she smiled at him. Hey, she said, how was your day? He kissed her cheek, set his keys on the counter, and said, long, but better now. She nodded and turned back to the stove. You have no idea what I know, she thought. For the first time in days, she felt something almost like power. That night, after Ryan fell asleep, Emily sat on the edge of the bathtub with the door locked and allowed herself exactly 20 minutes to fall apart. She cried silently. Both hands pressed over her mouth so no sound reached the bedroom where her husband slept. She cried for 10 years, for the conversations about children, for every anniversary dinner, every Sunday morning, every moment when she had looked at him and thought, this is real. At the 19-minute mark, she stopped. She washed her face with cold water. She looked at herself in the mirror the way you look when you are deciding who you will be next. She thought of her grandmother, a woman who had survived worse, and the sentence she used to say, "The first thing grief tries to do is make you stupid." Don T. let it. Emily dried her face, went back to the bedroom, laid down beside Ryan, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. Then she made a list in her head. It was not about saving the marriage. It was about what she needed to do next. Patricia Novak was a divorce attorney whose name Emily had seen mentioned 3 times in the past year. Once in a magazine article about high-asset divorce cases in Texas. Once in a conversation at a professional event that she had filed away in the back of her mind for no reason she could have articulated at the time. And once in a text from her college roommate Claire, who had used Patricia 8 months ago and described her as, quote, a surgeon. She goes in, she takes what's yours, and she leaves no scar. Emily called Patricia's office at 8:15 on a Friday morning from her car in the parking garage at work before she went inside with the engine still running. Patricia's assistant answered. Emily said she needed to speak with Ms. Novak about a potential representation. She was told that Ms. Novak was in a meeting until 10:00, but could call back. Emily left her number. She said it was important. Patricia called her at 10:03. "Ms. Carter," she said. Her voice was what Emily had hoped for. Calm, precise, completely unimpressed by anything. "Tell me what's happening," Emily told her. She told her in the same organized, evidence-led way she presented marketing data to clients, systematically starting with the receipt, moving through the hotel records, ending with the phone. She kept her voice level. She did not editorialize. She stated facts. When she was done, there was a brief silence. Then Patricia said, "How long do you think this has been going on?" Emily said, "Based on what I found, at least 6 months, possibly longer." Patricia asked, "Do you want to save the marriage or end it?" Emily had expected to hesitate. She did not. "End it," she said, "but I want to do it right." Patricia said, "Good. Come in Monday morning. Bring everything you found. Do not change your behavior. Don't confront him. Don't move money. Don't say anything that tips him off. The element of surprise is the most valuable asset you currently have. Don't waste it," Emily said. "I understand." She sat in her car for another 4 minutes after she hung up, looking at the steering wheel. Then she went inside and had a completely normal day. Monday's meeting with Patricia was 2 hours long. Patricia reviewed everything Emily had brought, the receipts, the photographs Emily had discreetly taken of the hotel confirmation emails on Ryan's computer, the notes Emily had made with dates and times. Patricia was thorough and quiet. She asked precise questions and wrote on a legal pad in handwriting so small Emily could barely read it from across the desk. At the end, she set down her pen, folded her hands, and looked directly at Emily. "That's going to help us," Emily said. "What do we do first?" Patricia said. "First, we establish your financial position completely. I want to know everything that's jointly held, everything in his name, everything in your name, every account, every asset, every debt. I have a forensic accountant I work with regularly. I'm going to bring him in." Patricia continued. "Second, we document what is still happening. My firm works with an investigator. She's excellent and discreet. I'd like to authorize surveillance for the next 30 days. Emily repeated the word surveillance, and Patricia clarified. Photographs, meeting logs, proof of the ongoing affair. In Texas, adultery can matter in the division of marital assets. With the asset profile you described, that matters," Emily said. "Do it." Patricia paused, then looked at her carefully. "One more thing. Are you all right, Ms. Carter?" Emily thought about the 20 minutes on the edge of the bathtub, the mirror, and her grandmother. Then she said, "I have been holding myself together my whole life. Ms. Novak, that will not be the problem." Patricia studied her, then said, "No, I do not think it will be." Within 2 weeks, Sandra confirmed everything. She was quiet, methodical, forgettable in the useful way a good investigator must be. Her folder contained photographs, logs, and evidence of 17 separate meetings between Ryan Carter and Olivia Brooks over 63 days. Olivia Brooks, that was her name. Emily looked at the photographs with deliberate steadiness. Olivia was 27, a junior account manager at Ryan's company. Pretty in the uncomplicated way people are before they learn how complicated the world can be. In the photos, Olivia looked like someone who believed she was about to get everything she wanted. Emily expected rage or humiliation when she saw her face. Instead, what she felt was closer to pity. Not pity from above. Pity for someone standing in a room where the walls were about to come down. Emily said to Patricia, "He's told her he's going to leave me." Patricia looked up. Yes, Sandra confirmed it. He's promised her it will happen soon. He's been lying to both of us. Yes, Emily closed the folder and set it back on Patricia's desk. Then I want to talk about the plan. That Thursday afternoon, inside Patricia Novak's quiet, powerful office, the plan took shape. It started with Sandra's intelligence. Ryan had made a reservation. Sandra had confirmed it through sources Emily didn't ask about and didn't need to know at Meridian, the most exclusive restaurant in Dallas, for the following Friday night. The reservation was in Ryan's name. The booking notes described it as a special occasion dinner. Sandra had learned that Ryan planned to use the dinner to tell Olivia he was ready to leave Emily. He wanted to walk into Meridian still technically married and walk out having made his choice. Publicly, permanently, at least. That was the story he had sold Olivia. Emily listened, then asked, what if he walks into that restaurant, expecting one ending and walks out with another? Patricia had been waiting for that. Emily saw it in the almost smile that crossed the attorney's face. Patricia opened a drawer and slid a large manila envelope across the desk. I had these prepared 3 days ago, she said. I was waiting to see whether you would reach the same conclusion I did. Emily looked at it. The divorce papers. Patricia nodded. Complete, signed by me, and requiring only his signature. Every piece of evidence is organized and attached. Emily picked up the envelope. It was heavier than she expected. She imagined Ryan, the candlelight, the champagne, and Olivia believing the night was the beginning of her story. How do we make sure it gets delivered? Emily asked. Leave that to me, Patricia said. Emily set the envelope down, breathed in, breathed out, and said, let's do it. In the days that followed, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had stopped asking for permission. She was angry, but the anger had become useful. She was sad, but she no longer let the sadness run the room. She gave it small, private spaces, then returned to the work. Above all, she was ready. She moved what mattered to Claire's apartment in small, ordinary trips, photographs, jewelry, childhood keepsakes, the little paintings she had collected over the years. Nothing large enough to draw attention. Nothing Ryan would notice until it was already too late. She did this quietly and methodically, on days when Ryan was at the office using the back of her own car and 2 afternoons when she told her assistant she was working from home. She changed the direct deposit on her paychecks to an account Ryan didn't know about. She spoke with the forensic accountant Patricia had recommended and followed every instruction precisely. She knew down to the dollar where she stood financially. She knew what was hers, what was his, and what the court would likely view as marital property. She signed a lease on a clean, bright apartment she had toured virtually, in a neighborhood she had always liked, with a balcony facing the skyline. She paid the deposit and 2 months' rent, then told no one except Patricia. On Thursday night before the dinner, Ryan made pasta, poured wine, and asked what she had been thinking about because she seemed quiet. Just work, she said. Big project. I tell you when it's done. He nodded. That S, my girl. Always working. Emily smiled and looked at him across the table. This was the man she had loved, the man she had chosen, the man who had discussed having children with her while his secret phone sat hidden 12 feet away. The feeling was grief, anger, and something almost like forgiveness. Not the kind that says it was okay, but the kind that means, I am putting this down and walking away. Tomorrow night, she thought. This ends, Ryan said. I have a late dinner tomorrow. Client thing. Don't wait up. Okay, she said. She took a sip of wine. I hope it goes well. And she meant it. Not for him, but for herself. She hoped every detail landed exactly as planned. She hoped that envelope hit the table with the weight of every lie he had told. She finished her pasta, washed the dishes, went to bed, and slept better than she had in months. The next morning, after her first full night of sleep in weeks, Emily woke at 5:45, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. She heard nothing from the bedroom. In that silence, she wrote down everything she needed to do, in order, with no wasted words. Patricia had been clear. Precision mattered more than speed. Every move had to be deliberate, documented, and defensible. She could not afford to act from emotion. She could not afford a mistake. The part of Emily that had spent 15 years building campaigns, diagnosing failure, and rebuilding strategy without losing composure understood the assignment completely. She started writing. Financial accounts, personal items, apartment, Patricia, Sandra, Claire. She looked at the list, then wrote Friday night at the bottom and underlined it twice. She finished her coffee, rinsed the cup, folded the legal pad, and tucked it into her work bag. Then she went upstairs and dressed for work in the same closet where her husband was still sleeping. She moved quietly, choosing her clothes with calm focus. At 6:50, she left the house. Ryan did not stir. She did not look back when she pulled out of the driveway. She had work to do. The first call she made that morning, before she reached the office, was to Patricia. Emily was sitting in traffic on Central Expressway at 7:15, the sun coming up flat and gold over the city. Patricia answered on the second ring. "You re-up early," Patricia said. Emily said, "I've been thinking about timing. If the reservation is Friday the 14th, I need to know how far in advance the papers can be delivered, who receives them, and exactly how the handoff works." Patricia said she had already spoken with Meridian S manager, Charles Beaumont. He came recommended by a colleague, had handled sensitive situations before, and understood discretion. He would accept the envelope Thursday afternoon and keep it in his personal office until Friday evening. Emily asked whether Charles understood what the envelope contained. Patricia said he understood. It was a legal document that needed to be delivered to Mr. Ryan Carter at his table at a specific time. "What time?" Emily asked. Patricia said that was the question. Sandra believed Ryan would arrive between 7 and 7:15. If they wanted maximum impact, the envelope should arrive at 7:45, late enough for comfort, early enough for a full restaurant. Emily was quiet. Then she said, 7:45. Patricia said, 7:45. Emily said, "Perfect." She was not shaking. She was not crying. She was thinking with total precision. This was not revenge, she told herself. This was accountability. Truth after being held underwater too long, finally breaking the surface. This was Emily Carter refusing to disappear quietly. At 9 that morning, she called Gerald Holt, the forensic accountant, a careful man who spoke almost entirely in facts and seemed incapable of either small talk or panic. Gerald told her his review of the joint accounts was complete, and what he found made Emily grip the phone tighter. "Mr. Carter has been making cash withdrawals," he said, "irregular amounts over the past 8 months. 50 here, 200 there. Nothing large, but consistent. I also found what appears to be a secondary credit account in his name alone, opened about 9 months ago and used for restaurants, hotels, and 2 jewelry purchases," Emily said. "Jewelry," Gerald said. "A bracelet and a necklace. Combined value, about 3,400. Emily said nothing for 4 seconds. "And our joint savings?" Gerald said they were untouched. Retirement accounts intact. Home equity unchanged. Ryan had been careful, funding the affair separately, either to protect himself legally or to keep Emily from noticing. "Or both," Emily said. Gerald agreed. She thanked him and asked him to send the full report to Patricia. After hanging up, she stared at her office wall. Jewelry, 3 to 400. She thought of the June anniversary card that had said, "You are my whole world." She had thought at the time that he seemed a little distracted, a little elsewhere. But she had chalked it up to work pressure and let it go. He had bought another woman jewelry the same month. He gave Emily a card that said, "You are my whole world." She picked up her pen. She went back to work. By 10:30 in the morning, the second enormous thing had already happened. By 10:30, something else had begun, though Emily did not know it yet. Claire Matsuda, her closest friend since sophomore year of college, had been watching her for weeks. 22 years of friendship had made Claire impossible to fool for long. Claire was perceptive in the way that people who have loved someone for 20 years are perceptive. She had noticed something off about Emily for weeks, had been watching, had been waiting, and when Emily called her that afternoon to ask if she could store a few boxes at her place, something in Emily's voice finally broke through the composure. "Emily," Claire said, "what is actually happening?" Emily said she only needed to store a few things. Claire did not let it go. "Emily, it asked me. Talk to me." After a silence, Emily said, "He's been having an affair. I have evidence. I have an attorney. It's being handled." Claire went silent for 2 seconds. Then she said, "I need you to say that again." Emily said, "You heard me." Claire said, "Ryan. The Ryan who has had Thanksgiving with me for 8 years. The Ryan who gave that birthday speech about how lucky he was. That Ryan." Emily said yes. Claire asked how long she had known. 3 weeks, Emily said. Claire's voice dropped. "You carried this alone for 3 weeks." Emily said, "I needed to be sure. I needed everything in place. I could not fall apart before the work was done." Something cracked in Emily's chest. Not broke, just opened enough to let some heat out. "I need to store some boxes," Claire said. "Done. What else?" Emily said. "I might need a place to land after Friday." Claire answered, "You have a key." You have always had a key. Emily thanked her. Claire told her not to. Just promise me you are going to be okay, Emily said. I am going to be better than okay. She believed it, and the certainty of that belief surprised her. She never took anything large enough to be obviously missed, never disturbed the surface of what their shared home looked like. The photographs she cared about most. The small oil painting she had bought in Santa Fe on a solo work trip 7 years ago. The one Ryan always said he didn't understand, and she had always secretly loved more because of that. Her grandmother's pearl earrings, the journal she had kept since college, the things that were hers in the truest sense, not acquired together, not part of the shared life, but pieces of the person she had been before Ryan and would still be after. She moved them in her work bag and in canvas totes she brought in and out like groceries. Ryan noticed nothing. He was distracted in the way she now understood was not stress but absence. He ate dinner across from her Tuesday night and talked about a conference call. She watched his face and thought, "You are thinking about her right now, here at this table with me." She passed him the salad, asked about the conference call, and smiled in exactly the right places. She was very good at this. On Wednesday afternoon, Sandra gave an update that made Patricia call immediately. He changed the reservation, Patricia said, 7 to 7:30. Emily asked why. Patricia said Sandra believed Ryan wanted to take Olivia for a drink first at a bar 2 blocks from Meridian, a place Sandra had documented them entering before, so they will arrive together. Emily asked. Patricia said, almost certainly. Emily asked whether that changed anything. Patricia said it changed the optics, not the plan. If Olivia was sitting across from Ryan when the envelope arrived, there would be no buffer, no chance for him to intercept it or step outside and manage the scene, Emily said. Then it's better, Patricia said. Charles has been informed of the new arrival time. Everything remains on schedule. The 7:45 delivery confirmed, Emily said. Good. She hung up and sat at her desk and thought about Olivia Brooks for the first time in several days. She had deliberately kept herself from thinking too much about Olivia. It wasn't productive, and it had a tendency to pull her toward a kind of rage that felt good in the moment and useful for nothing. But now thinking about the two of them walking into Meridian together, Olivia in whatever she had chosen to wear for the night, she believed was going to change her life, believing that Ryan was finally ready. Now Emily felt something more complicated than rage. Olivia deserved the truth too, not as a kindness, but because Ryan had used her as well. He had turned her into an exit plan he never truly intended to take. Ryan did not want to leave his life. He wanted to add to it. Wife, house, reputation, mistress, secret dinners, rose petals, jewelry and no consequences. He thought he could have all of it forever. He was wrong. Everything looked the same on the surface, while underneath the pressure builds and builds. Emily went to work. She had 3 meetings. She reviewed copy for a campaign her team had been developing. She ate lunch at her desk. She was to all observable evidence a woman having a perfectly ordinary Thursday. At 2:00 in the afternoon, Patricia texted her envelope delivered to Meridian. Charles has confirmed receipt. Everything is in place. Emily read the text under her desk during a meeting. She typed back 1 word. Good. She put her phone away. She focused on the meeting. That evening, Ryan made a phone call from the back porch while Emily was in the kitchen, and she did not strain to hear it. She had everything she needed. She did not need one more receipt, one more whispered lie, one more screen lighting up in the dark. She was done collecting. Now all she had to do was wait for what she had already set in motion. He came back inside, said the food smelled great, and she said it was almost ready. They ate. He told a story from work. She laughed in the right place, until she went to bed. She remained the wife he still believed he understood. She turned off her lamp and thought, tomorrow. Friday morning came. Emily was awake before the alarm. She showered, dressed, and went downstairs. Ryan was already at the kitchen counter, in his work clothes, a coffee in hand. He looked up and said, "You re-up early." "Big day," she said. He asked what was happening. "Just a project that has been building for a while. Today is the day it lands." He nodded. "Well, good luck. You've got this." She looked at him and said, "I know." Then he was gone. The door closed with its ordinary sound. His car backed out like every other morning. Emily stood at the counter with her coffee and listened to the engine fade. "The next time I see you," she thought, "will be the last time you see this house." She sent Claire a text tonight. "Be ready," Claire responded in 40 seconds. "I'm ready. Have been for days." You, Emily, looked around the kitchen. The coffee maker, the fruit bowl, the photograph on the refrigerator from a trip they had taken to Colorado 4 years ago. The two of them on a mountain trail laughing at something neither of them would now be able to remember. She had already taken the photographs that mattered. This one she was leaving behind. Let him look at it. She texted Claire. Ready. Then she set the phone down, finished her coffee, and called Patricia one final time. Patricia said everything was confirmed. Thomas, the senior waiter, had worked there for 11 years and could deliver news to a table without changing his expression 1 degree. Emily said. Perfect. Then Patricia asked, "How are you feeling?" Emily answered honestly, like someone who has carried a very heavy thing for a very long time and is about to set it down. Patricia was quiet, then said, "After tonight, we move forward. Don't to think beyond tonight. Just let it happen." Emily thanked her for everything. Patricia said, "This is what I do. But you did the hard part. You held together when most people would not have." Emily hung up, left the office, took the elevator to the garage, got in her car, and drove to Claire's apartment. Claire was there waiting with takeout containers on the counter and a bottle of good wine already open on the table and the television on low in the background, and all the lights lit up warm and bright. She looked at Emily when she walked in. She said, "How are you doing?" Emily set her bag down. She stood in Claire's kitchen in her good work clothes and she looked at her best friend and she said, "Ask me in about 3 hours." Emily sat down and waited for 7:45. She did not picture Ryan's face, Olivia's shock, the restaurant going quiet, or the evidence inside the envelope. She had lived inside those details for 3 weeks. Now she let them go. She thought about the balcony of her new apartment, which she had finally visited in person on Wednesday morning before work. Standing outside in the early light looking at the city, she thought about how the air had felt. She thought about the way the skyline looked from that height, familiar and entirely new at the same time, like something she had always known was there, but had never quite allowed herself to see clearly. She thought, "That is mine now." Claire refilled her glass without being asked. At 7:43, Emily's phone lit up. A text from a number she didn't recognize, Patricia's investigator. Sandra, doing what she had been asked to do if the plan held. The text said 4 words. It said, "He is inside. Confirmed." Emily read it. She put the phone face down on the table. She picked up her wine glass. 2 minutes. She thought about Ryan smoothing his tie in the mirror. She thought about the text he had sent on a Friday night. She has no idea. She thought about the receipt falling out of the suit jacket and landing face up on the floor. She thought about every dinner, every kiss, every carefully constructed lie told with a warm smile and a hand on her shoulder. She breathed in. 1 minute she thought about her grandmother's voice. "The first thing grief tries to do is make you stupid. Don't let it." She hadn't. The clock on Claire's microwave changed. 7:45. Somewhere across the city, in a restaurant full of candlelight and quiet conversation and the soft sound of a pianist playing something beautiful, a man named Thomas was walking toward table 7 with a large envelope in his hands. Emily set down her glass, closed her eyes, and thought. Now 7:45 came and went. In Claire's apartment, Emily did not move. The television was still on low in the background. Some cooking show, someone chopping vegetables with great urgency, and the sound of it was so aggressively normal that it almost felt funny. Almost. Claire had her own glass of wine, and she was watching Emily the way you watch someone who is standing very close to the edge of something. Claire had her own glass of wine and watched Emily the way you watch someone standing close to an edge. Not because you think they will fall, but because you love them. At 7:48, Emily's phone lit up. Sandra again. Envelope delivered. Waiter confirmed. Standing by. Claire said quietly. "It happened," Emily said. "It is happening right now." Claire set down her glass, folded her hands, and said nothing else. She understood that this was not a moment for words. It was a moment to be present while something enormous moved through the air across the city. At that precise moment, Ryan Carter was holding an envelope he had not expected and could not yet make himself open. Emily didn't know that yet. She was about to find out. At 7:51, her phone rang. Not a text. A call. The number was Ryan's. She looked at it. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Claire watched her face. Emily watched the screen. On the 4th ring, she declined the call. He called back immediately. She declined it again. A text came through Emily. "Pick up the phone, please." She put the phone face down. Claire said, "He called." Emily said, "He called." Claire said very carefully, "Are you okay?" Emily thought about it honestly, the way she had been making herself do everything these past weeks. Emily considered the question honestly. For 3 seconds, she sat with it. Then she said, "Yes, I genuinely am." Her hands were steady. Her voice was level. What she felt was not triumph, but pressure finally finding release. It was not triumph and not quite relief. It was pressure finally finding release. Like a window opened in a room closed too long. Ryan texted again. "Where are you? I need to talk to you. Emily, please." Then another. "This is not what it looks like. I can explain. Call me." 30 seconds later, another message appeared. "I love you. Please just call me." Emily read it 3 times. She thought about the receipt, the rose petals, the jewelry, and the secret phone. Then she turned the phone face down again. "More wine," she said. Claire stared at her, then reached for the bottle. "You are the most composed person I have ever met." Emily held out her glass. "I had 3 weeks to practice." What she did not yet know was how perfectly the envelope had landed. And the full story of it was more than she had planned, for even accounting for everything she had planned. Thomas, the senior waiter, had approached the table at 7:44. Ryan and Olivia were midway through their first course. The conversation, according to what Sandra could reconstruct from her position, had been warm. Olivia laughing at something Ryan had said. Ryan leaning forward with that particular posture of a man performing his most charming self. The table had champagne already poured, the kind of champagne you order when you believe the evening is a celebration. Thomas had set the envelope on the table in front of Ryan with both hands, the way you place something that requires care. He had said in a voice calibrated to be heard at the table and nowhere else, "Sir, a delivery from your wife." The word wife landed in that sentence like a stone dropped into still water. Olivia heard it first. Emily would later learn this from Sandra, who had a clear enough position to observe the table from a distance. Olivia's expression changed before Ryan's did, because Olivia understood what it meant before Ryan had even processed the words. Olivia had been waiting for months to stop being a secret, and in one sentence spoken by a stranger in a well-cut jacket, she understood that she was not about to stop being a secret. She was about to become a casualty. Ryan looked at the envelope for what Sandra estimated was 4 or 5 full seconds without touching it. Then he picked it up. He opened it the way you open something you already know is going to hurt you. Carefully, slowly, as if the pace of opening it might change what was inside. The first thing he saw was the cover letter from Patricia Novak's office on firm letterhead. The first page was Patricia Novak's cover letter. Formal notice of intent to dissolve the marriage of Emily Rose Carter and Ryan James Carter, citing adultery and attaching supporting evidence. Behind it were photographs. Not vague, not arguable. Photographs. Sandra's photographs were time-stamped, geotagged, and clear. Ryan and Olivia entering the Adolphus Hotel in August, leaving together in September, and walking into a restaurant in October when Ryan had told Emily he was at a client dinner. They required no explanation. Behind the photographs, the hotel receipts printed and organized by date. Behind the hotel receipts, the text messages transcribed and time-stamped, pulled from the records Patricia's firm had obtained through proper legal channels. And behind all of that, at the very back of the envelope, a single sheet of paper with 5 words written in Emily's own handwriting. Not typed, not printed, but written in the clear, precise script that Ryan had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and anniversary notes for 10 years. The note said, "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Sandra reported that Ryan read the note and then sat completely still for somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds. Not moving, not speaking, just sitting with the note in his hand, and the rest of the evidence spread across the white tablecloth in front of him and the champagne going flat in the glasses. Olivia across the table said, "And this part." Sandra heard clearly, Ryan, what is that? What is all of that?" Ryan didn't answer. Olivia reached across and took one of the photographs. She looked at it. She set it down. She picked up another one. Sandra reported that Olivia's face went through approximately 4 distinct expressions in about 6 seconds. Confusion, recognition, understanding, and then cold fury. Olivia had believed she was chosen. Now she sat in a full restaurant holding proof that Ryan had been giving 2 women different versions of the same performance. Olivia asked, "How long, Ryan? How long were you actually going to wait before telling her? Were you ever going to tell her? Or was this just something you were doing while you kept your real life exactly where you wanted it?" Ryan said. "It is not that simple," Olivia said. Dante, just that word. No heat, no tears, no performance. Sandra later said it was more devastating than any scene could have been. After that, Ryan's composure finally broke. He put his hands over his face. He sat in the middle of a full restaurant with the evidence of his double life spread across the table and his hands over his face. People at nearby tables had stopped pretending not to look. Olivia stood up. She picked up her bag from the back of her chair with the careful, deliberate movements of someone who is concentrating very hard on not breaking apart in public. She looked at Ryan one last time and said, "I hope she takes everything." Then she walked out of Meridian without looking back. Ryan sat alone at table 7 with champagne, photographs, and divorce papers. Then he picked up his phone and called Emily. Back at Claire's apartment, Emily's phone rang for the third time at 8:03. She looked at the screen. She looked at Claire. She turned the phone face down again. The calls kept coming. 807 Ryan calling. 811 Ryan calling. 8:14. A text. "Emily, I know you planned this. I know what you did. We need to talk. You owe me that." Emily read that one and felt something move through her that was not quite anger. It was sharper than anger and colder. The feeling of someone who had heard one thing too many. She picked up the phone and typed, "I do not owe you anything. Ryan, check your voicemail. My attorney has left you the next steps. Direct all further communication to her office. Please direct all further communication to her office." She sent it. She put the phone down. Claire, who had read every word, looked at her with an expression that was equal parts admiration and something close to awe. She said, "Emily." Emily said, "What?" Claire said, "You are absolutely terrifying. I mean that as the highest possible compliment." Emily almost smiled. "The first real one in 3 weeks. Patricia says I'm in a strong position," Claire said. "Patricia is understating it." Ryan texted at 8:19. "You're really doing this after everything. After 10 years. Emily read it and did not answer. She thought about responding. She decided against it. There was nothing to say to that sentence that her attorney hadn't already said more precisely and more permanently in the documents currently spread across a restaurant table across the city. She went to Patricia's voicemail. She hadn't yet played and put it on speaker so Claire could hear Emily. "It's Patricia. Sandra has confirmed the delivery went as planned. I've left a message with Ryan's personal cell and will attempt contact at the home address tomorrow if we don't hear from his representation by noon. Your apartment keys are at my office. My assistant will have them for you first thing in the morning. Get some rest." Patricia's message ended. "Tonight was the hard part. Everything from here is process. Call me when you are ready." Claire listened to the whole thing, then looked at Emily. "You have a new apartment," Emily said. "I signed the lease 2 weeks ago." Claire shook her head slowly, then raised her glass. "To you, genuinely, to the most organized, most terrifying, most impressive woman I know." Emily raised her glass and said, "To actually being free." Emily read it and felt the last tight place behind her sternum release. Ryan was in the house that was already half empty. He was walking through rooms and finding absence where he had expected presence. Finally, beginning to understand the size of what he had thrown away. She thought about him in the kitchen, finding her things gone. The small painting missing from the hallway, the jewelry box emptied, the closet half cleared. She thought about him standing in the bedroom they had shared for 10 years, and realizing that she had been planning this while she cooked him dinner, while she asked about his day, while she smiled and passed the salad and laughed in the right places. She hoped it felt like the floor dropping out. At 9:15, something happened Emily had not planned for, a twist she truly did not see coming. Her phone rang from a number she did not recognize. She almost ignored it, then looked at Claire, who shrugged. Emily answered. It was Olivia Brooks. Olivia called Emily Carter on the night the divorce papers were served, and Emily was so surprised she sat completely still for 2 seconds before saying hello. Olivia's voice was not hostile, and it was not hysterical. It was quiet, controlled, and worn out in the way a voice sounds after crying. Olivia said, "I got your number from someone. It does not matter who. I am sorry to call. I just needed to say I am sorry." Emily said nothing. Olivia continued, "I knew he was married. I want to be honest about that. He told me it was over between you two, that you were basically roommates, that he had been trying to leave for years. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I know that does not make it okay." Olivia said, "I only want you to know that the person I thought he was does not exist." Emily sat with that, then said, "The person I thought he was does not exist either." Olivia asked how Emily had stayed so calm. Emily thought about the bathtub, the mirror, and her grandmother. "I fell apart exactly once," she said. "Then I went to work." Olivia said, "I do not think I could have done what you did." Emily answered, "You do not know what you can do until you have to." After a silence, Olivia said she would not bother Emily again. She was not asking for forgiveness. She only wanted Emily to hear that she was sorry. Emily said her name. Olivia answered. Emily said, "Take care of yourself." Then she hung up. Claire had watched the entire call. "Was that her?" she asked. Emily nodded. What did she want? To apologize. Emily looked at the phone. She was telling the truth. I could hear it. He lied to both of us in exactly the same way. He told her what he told me, Emily said, that she was special, that he was committed, that he meant what he said. Different versions of the same lie, Claire said quietly. That is a particular kind of evil, Emily answered. Yes, it is. When Emily looked back down, something had settled in her face. Not softer, not harder. Resolved. She had processed the final piece of something enormous and was still standing. At 10:20, Ryan called one more time. She let it go to voicemail. She could hear the rawness in his voice. The hoarseness of a man who had spent 2 hours alone with the truth about himself. Emily, I know I have no right to ask you anything, but please, I am at the house, and you already moved things out. You planned all of this and did not say a word. I am sorry. I know that does not mean anything right now, but I need you to know I am sorry, and I love you, and I never. He stopped for a long time. Then he said quietly, please call me back. It doesn't feel good, Emily said. I don't enjoy hearing him like that, but it doesn't make me want to call him back. Broken doesn't mean changed. Sorry doesn't mean it didn't happen. That man on the voicemail is the same man who sat across from me Thursday night, looked me in the eye, and said he had a client dinner. He's not sorry because he was wrong. He's sorry because he got caught. Claire nodded. Emily said, there is a difference. She did not call him back. She deleted the voicemail and stayed at Claire's that night. They stayed up until nearly midnight, talking about things that had nothing to do with Ryan, Claire's work, a trip she was considering, and a restaurant they had meant to try for months. Normal things. Real things. Ordinary life beginning to fill the space the last 3 weeks had emptied. Around 11:30, Emily realized she was laughing, genuinely laughing, at something Claire said about a disastrous date. The laughter felt clean and uncomplicated, something Emily had almost forgotten was possible. She stopped mid-law and said, I forgot what this felt like. Claire asked what she meant. Emily said, this, just sitting here laughing without all of it underneath. Claire looked at her with an expression full of feeling. Get used to it. Emily smiled. I intend to. She slept on Claire's couch that night and fell asleep almost immediately. No locked bathroom. No careful breathing. No lying beside a man she no longer recognized. Just sleep. Clean, complete, and finally her own. In the morning, keys were waiting at Patricia's office. Keys to a door that belonged only to her. Keys to a life she was beginning to understand she was allowed to want. Emily picked them up at 8:40 Saturday morning from Patricia's assistant, a young woman named Renee, who handed over the envelope with both hands and said with a warmth that felt entirely genuine, Congratulations, Miss Carter. Emily thanked her, tucked the envelope into her bag, and walked back out into the morning air. She sat in her car for a moment with the envelope in her lap. She opened it. 2 keys on a plain silver ring, an address on a card in Patricia's handwriting. Nothing elaborate, nothing ceremonial. Just 2 pieces of metal that meant this space is yours. No one else's. Yours. She drove to the apartment. She let herself in. She stood in the empty living room. Just her no furniture, yet no boxes. Nothing but the light coming through the windows and that particular quiet of a space that hasn't been lived in yet. That is waiting to become something. And she breathed in and out, in and out. She walked to the balcony door and opened it, and stepped outside and looked at the Dallas skyline in the Saturday morning light. And she thought, this is the first moment of the rest of my life. Not Friday night. Not the divorce papers. Not the phone calls or the deleted voicemail. This moment right here, standing on her own balcony, looking at a city she had lived in for 12 years as though she was seeing it clearly for the very first time. She stayed out there for 10 minutes. Then she went inside and began a list of everything she needed. She was good at lists. Patricia called at 9:15. How is the apartment? She asked. Emily said, perfect, quiet, mine. Patricia moved straight to business. Ryan's attorney had contacted her office that morning. His name was David Kowalski. Competent, not exceptional. He had requested a delay in the formal filing process to allow time for what he called reconciliation discussions. Patricia had already refused. She also told Kowalski that the adultery documentation was comprehensive, time-stamped, and admissible, and that delays would only give her more time to build the asset case. Emily said, I imagine he went quiet. Patricia said. He did. I'm filing formally Monday morning. Ryan will be formally served at his office by 11:00 a.m. Once that happens, everything becomes official and the 60-day waiting period begins under Texas law, Emily said. And the house, Patricia said. He can stay in the house during the waiting period you've already vacated, which actually helps us. It establishes that you left your stable. You're not dependent on the marital home. That strengthens your position significantly. A brief pause. Emily, I want to prepare you for something, Emily said. What? Patricia said. The next few weeks are going to be uncomfortable in ways that have nothing to do with legal proceedings. Patricia continued. What happened at Meridian will spread. Restaurant staff talk. Other diners talk. Ryan works in a community where reputation matters. Soon, people will tell versions of your story. Some will reach out. Some will not. I want you ready. By Saturday afternoon. Less than 20 hours after Thomas placed that envelope on table 7, the story was already moving through Dallas. In a city where professional and social circles overlap, privacy is precious and nearly impossible. Emily never learned the exact path it took. Which diner texted whose friend? Which colleague heard from someone 2 tables away? She only knew the result. Her phone filled with messages. Stunned, furious, supportive, and sometimes from people she never expected. Her colleague Diane, who had worked alongside her for 4 years, sent a message at 2:17. Emily. I just heard. I am so sorry and so angry on your behalf. Please let me know. If you need anything, her friend Marcus from graduate school, whom she hadn't spoken to in 8 months, sent heard what happened to you. Okay. Whatever you need. Ryan's college roommate, a man named Jeff, who had been at their wedding and who Emily had always genuinely liked, called her directly at 3:40. She almost didn't answer. She answered. Jeff said. Emily, I do not know what to say, she answered. You do not have to say anything. He said he had not known. And she could hear him searching for the right word. Finally he said, I am ashamed of him, for what it is worth. You deserve so much better than this, Jeff said. I know, Emily answered. I'm starting to act like it. After she hung up, she thought about how a lie collapses not only on the person who told it, but on everyone standing near it. All the people who had shared meals with them, attended their parties, bought them wedding gifts, wished them happy anniversaries. All the people who had believed in the version of Ryan and Emily that Ryan had constructed and maintained. They were all standing in the rubble of it now, trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't. Emily thought, I know exactly how that feels. She did not have long to sit with it. At 4:08, the discomfort Patricia warned her about arrived in a text from Ryan's mother. Emily, I need to talk to you. Please call me when you can. Emily stared at the message. Margaret Carter was 71, and she had been kind to Emily from the beginning. She had welcomed her with genuine warmth. She was also Ryan's mother, which meant her pain belonged to a conflict Emily had not created and could not solve. Emily typed back, Hi Margaret, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'll call you soon. I promise. She sent it. She put the phone down. She was not going to be able to call Margaret today. Not yet. She needed a few more days of solid footing before she could hold that conversation with the steadiness it deserved. Margaret would understand that, or she wouldn't. Emily was learning, slowly and deliberately, that her first obligation was to herself. Her therapist would have agreed. She had made her first appointment with Dr. Sarah Okafor the previous Wednesday, not from panic, but from the same practical logic she had applied to everything else. At the start of the session, Emily said, I'm not here because I'm falling apart. I'm here because I don't want to fall apart 6 months from now when I think I'm fine and the ground opens under me. Dr. Okafor called it one of the most self-aware first session answers she had ever heard. Emily replied, I've had 3 weeks to think. Dr. Okafor smiled. They talked for an hour. Emily cried twice, quietly, the way people cry when they finally tell the truth about something they have protected. She left feeling as if a closed room had been aired out. On Saturday afternoon, she called Dr. Okafor's office and asked to move her Tuesday appointment to Monday if possible. She had a feeling she would need it sooner. She was right. Sunday was when Ryan showed up. She was eating takeout from a place down the street and reading a book she hadn't had time to open in weeks. And her phone showed Ryan's number at 11:47 in the morning. She didn't answer. He called again at noon. She didn't answer. He called a third time at 12:08, and she answered because 3 calls in 20 minutes felt like something she needed to shut down directly. Emily answered and said, Ryan, you need to go through Patricia's office. He said he knew, but needed to hear her voice and know she was okay. She said she was fine. Then he asked where she was. You are not at Claire S. he said, and stopped. Emily went completely still. You went to Claire's. Ryan said he only wanted to know she was safe. Emily said, listen carefully. Do not go to Claire's apartment. Do not come to my workplace. Do not try to find where I am living. If you do any of those things, I will ask Patricia to file for a protective order, and I will get one. Do you understand? Silence, then Ryan said, in a small voice. I just wanted to talk, Emily said. There is nothing to talk about. He called it a mistake. She said his name. He admitted it was more than a mistake, that it had gone on too long, that there was no excuse. Then he asked for one conversation. Emily thought about it for 2 seconds and said no, calmly and completely. She said goodbye and ended the call. Her hands were steady. Later, she would tell Dr. Okafor this was the moment she knew she would be okay. Not the envelope, not the keys, not the balcony, but the moment she said no and no part of her reached back toward the door. That moment, with takeout going cold beside her and the silence of her own apartment around her, was the moment. Monday arrived with the clarity of a properly organized day. Emily met Dr. Okafor at 9, earlier than their regular appointment. She told her about Ryan going to Claire's, the calls, the deleted voicemail, and the unanswered texts. Dr. Okafor listened with the kind of attention that makes you say more than you planned. At the end, she asked, how did you feel when you told him no? Emily said, free. Dr. Okafor wrote something down. Then she said, I want to ask something that might be uncomfortable. Is there any part of you that wants him to suffer? Emily thought about it honestly before answering. In the beginning, yes, Emily said. When I was still finding things, part of me wanted him to hurt the way I hurt. But now I just want it over. Clean, finished, behind me. Whether he suffers isn't my job anymore, Dr. Okafor said. That is a very healthy place to be, Emily said. It took work to get here, Dr. Okafor said. It always does. At 11:00 a.m. Ryan was formally served at his office. Patricia texted at 11:04. Served, confirmed by process server. He accepted. No incident. Emily read the text outside Dr. Okafor's building and thought, it is real now. She waited for grief or relief to hit her. Instead, there was quiet. The city went on around her. Indifferent to the legal end of her marriage, she texted Patricia back. Thank you. Keep me updated. Thank you. Keep me updated. She started her car. She went to work. The office was the same. Her desk was the same. Her team was the same. Though Diane caught her eye across the room when she came in and gave her a look that said, I see you. I'm here. Emily nodded back. That was enough. She had meetings, a presentation, and 2 campaigns that needed her attention. She gave them her full focus because the work required it, and because work was not avoidance. It was the part of her that had always been true, the part that had survived intact, and maybe, if she was honest, had come through the last 3 weeks sharper than it was before. Her director, a woman named Helen, who had been in the industry for 30 years and had seen more than she ever discussed, called her into her office at 3:00 in the afternoon. Helen said, close the door. Emily closed it. Helen looked at her with a direct, no pretense gaze. How are you actually doing? Emily said, better than I expected. Helen said she had heard something happened and did not need the details. Emily answered, I am going through a divorce. It is being handled. Helen nodded once, then said, I want to talk to you about the Meridian account. Emily blinked. Meridian was one of the firm's largest new business opportunities, a national luxury hospitality brand looking for a new marketing partner. I know what you've been going through, Helen said. I'm asking you because of it, not in spite of it. I've watched you for 2 weeks, and you're sharper than I've ever seen you. Whatever happened has focused you in a way people can't fake. Helen leaned forward. You're not the same person who walked in here 6 weeks ago. I don't know exactly who you are now, but I want that person leading my biggest pitch. Emily sat with it, then said, give me the brief. She walked out of Helen's office and back to her desk, and she opened the folder and she read it cover to cover without stopping. Her mind moved through it the way it moved through everything now, quickly, clearly, without the low-level interference that she hadn't even realized had been running in the background of her thinking for months. The static was gone. The invisible cost of loving someone who was lying to you. The low hum of a marriage that was not what she believed. What remained was clean, fast, and entirely hers. She picked up her pen and started writing. She started writing. Ryan contacted Patricia's offices 3 times that week. His attorney, David Kowalski, called twice requesting meetings proposing alternatives, suggesting mediation. Patricia declined each contact efficiently and professionally. She reported to Emily that Ryan was attempting to negotiate the terms of the asset settlement, raising objections to several of the positions Patricia had taken regarding the joint investment accounts and the equity in the house. Patricia said Ryan would push back on the investment accounts because he had contributed more income, which was technically true. Emily asked what that meant. Patricia said the adultery documentation changed the calculation, and his attorney knew it. He is posturing, Patricia said. This may get contentious before it gets clean. He may try to drag it out, Emily said. Let him try, Patricia said. That is the correct answer. Something about conduct policies. Thought you should know. Emily read the text and felt something she had not expected to feel complicated. Not satisfaction, she had been honest with herself about not wanting his destruction, but something more layered than that. The understanding that actions have weight that travels further than the person who takes them. That what Ryan had done had not stayed contained inside the walls of their marriage. It had moved into his professional world, into his reputation, into the opinion of people he worked alongside every day. And it was doing what truth always does when it finally gets loose. It was finding every surface. She texted Diane back, "Thank you for telling me." She did not say anything else. She did not reach out to anyone at Ryan's company. She did not comment, did not amplify, did not do anything that could be characterized as using the situation to cause additional harm. That was not who she was. It had never been who she was. She noted it, filed it away, and understood that Ryan's carefully built life was dismantling itself. She did not need to help it collapse. Walking out the door had been enough. That, she thought, was justice that required no further participation. Friday arrived exactly 1 week since Meridian and Emily marked it privately without ceremony. She was in her apartment, which now had a couch and a real bed, and the small oil painting from Santa Fe hanging on the wall where she could see it from the kitchen. It was starting to look like a place where someone lived, where she lived. The distinction felt important every single time she thought about it. She made coffee. She stood on the balcony. She looked at the skyline. She thought about Friday 1 week ago. The anxiety that she had refused to call anxiety, the wine at Claire's table, the clock moving toward 7:45, Sandra's text. She thought about how long that week had felt while she was inside it, and how different it looked from the outside of it already. Her phone rang. She expected Patricia or Claire or possibly Diane. It was Margaret Carter, she answered. Margaret said, "Emily, thank you for picking up." Emily said, "Of course." Margaret, a silence. Margaret spoke carefully, her voice tired. "I want you to know I am not calling to defend him. What he did is indefensible. I raised him to be better than this, and I am heartbroken and ashamed." "Please let me finish," Margaret said. "I spent 10 years watching you love my son and build a life with him. You were, frankly, a better partner than he deserved. I want you to know I see you as Emily, a woman wronged by my son, who handled it with dignity." Emily's throat tightened. Margaret asked if they could keep in touch, though Emily had no obligation. "I would very much like to know that you are all right," Emily said. "I will keep in touch." And she meant it, Emily said. "I'll keep in touch." She meant it. After she hung up, she stood on her balcony for a long time with her coffee going cold in her hands. She thought about how grief was never one thing. It was always several things at once, layered and contradictory. The loss and the relief and the love that was real even inside the betrayal, and the anger that was clean and justified, and the strange specific sadness of losing people you had not realized you were also losing when you lost the marriage. Margaret, Jeff, the shape of holidays. The future she had believed was coming, Emily thought. I am allowed to grieve all of that. Then I am allowed to build something new. She finished her coffee, opened the Meridian brief, and worked for 4 straight hours. At 7 in the evening, exactly 1 week after Thomas, the waiter, had approached table 7 with an envelope in his hands, Emily Carter sat in her own apartment in the city she loved, doing work that was entirely hers, in a life that was for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember completely honest. She thought about Ryan, not with warmth exactly, but without hatred. She thought about him in the house they used to share, or wherever he was now living inside the consequences of the choices he had made, over and over again when he could have chosen differently. She thought about what it must feel like to lose your marriage and your reputation and your mistress and your clean reflection in the mirror all at once. She had her own life to think about, a pitch to win, a balcony to stand on in the morning, work that belonged to her. Quietly, the ground beneath her feet began to feel solid again. The worst was behind her. The best, she thought, was still coming. 3 weeks later, Emily Carter stood in the largest conference room at her firm and delivered the best presentation of her professional life. She had worked for 21 days, not obsessively, but with the clean focus of someone no longer carrying a hidden weight. She was sleeping, now actually sleeping, the deep, uninterrupted kind that she had forgotten was possible, but with a focus so clean and complete that it surprised even her. Every morning she woke up in her apartment, made coffee, stood on her balcony for 10 minutes looking at the city, and then sat down and worked. The brief, the strategy, the creative concept, the numbers. She built the pitch from the foundation up, the way you build when you are no longer holding up a structure that was quietly collapsing around you. Helen gave her a team of 4, and Emily led them clearly, firmly, and without apology. Diane kept sending her looks across the conference table that said, "I see what is happening to you." On pitch morning, Emily wore a new suit, sharper than the careful clothes she had worn for years beside Ryan. It looked like who she was becoming. Set up the room. She ran through the deck one final time. Helen came in at 8:50 and looked at the setup and said, "You ready?" Emily said completely. Helen looked at her for a moment. She said, "Whatever has happened to you in the last month, don't lose it." Emily said, "I don't intend to." The Meridian executives arrived at 9:00, 4 of them, led by a woman named Catherine Walsh, who had a reputation in the industry for being precise, demanding, and almost impossible to impress. Emily had researched her thoroughly. She knew what Catherine Walsh responded to and what she didn't, and she had built the entire presentation around the things that mattered to her specifically rather than the things that looked good generically. Emily stood up and she began. She spoke for 45 minutes. She did not read from the deck. She knew every number, every creative rationale, every strategic pivot point by memory because she had lived inside the material for 3 weeks and it had become part of how she was thinking. Catherine Walsh asked 7 questions, sharp, probing questions, the kind designed to find the places where a presentation is confident on the surface but hollow underneath. Emily answered everyone without hesitation. At the end, Catherine Walsh looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Miss Carter, how long have you been in this industry?" Emily said, 15 years, Catherine said. "And this is the first time I've sat across from you," Emily said.
"Yes." Catherine said that won't be the case going forward.
Helen, sitting at the far end of the table, kept her expression completely professional. But Emily saw her press her lips together in the way she did when she was very pleased and not quite letting it show. The official call came 4 days later. The firm had won the Meridian account. It was the largest new client they had brought on in 3 years. Helen called Emily into her office and told her, and then said without any preamble, "I'm recommending you for the director position that opens in January. Senior Director, National Accounts," Emily said. Helen said, "Don't argue with me. You've earned it. And frankly, I should have done this a year ago." Emily sat with that for a moment. A year ago. She had been spending energy she did not know she was spending, feeding a marriage that was giving nothing real back. Her work had never been bad, but it had not been this. Not at full capacity. Not with this much room inside her own mind. She said, "Thank you, Helen." Helen said, "Thank yourself. You did the work." Walking back to her desk, Emily thought about a version of herself from 4 months ago who would have received that news and immediately called Ryan to tell him who would have come home that evening and made dinner and sat across the table from a man who was texting his mistress and told him about her win and watched him smile and say all the right things and felt for a moment like her life was full. She called Claire. Claire screamed so loudly Emily had to hold the phone away from her ear. The divorce moved with the grinding efficiency of legal processes. Never fast enough. Always one more document, one more signature, one more exchange between attorneys. Always requiring one more document, one more signature, one more exchange between attorneys. Patricia managed it with her customary precision. Ryan's attorney continued to push on the asset division, continued to raise objections, continued to deploy the various procedural tactics that attorneys use when their client's position is weak, but their client refuses to accept it. Emily let Patricia handle it. She checked in twice a week, signed what needed signing, and kept her attention on the parts of her life that were growing. Then, one Wednesday afternoon in December, Patricia called with news Emily had not expected. Patricia said, "I have something to tell you that's going to feel complicated." Emily said, "Tell me," Patricia said. Ryan's company completed their internal review. He's been asked to resign. Emily was quiet. Patricia said the conduct review found violations of their professional relationship policy. specifically the relationship with Olivia Brooks, who was a direct report in his department. He's negotiated a quiet exit, but it's an exit. He's out, Emily said. What about Olivia? Patricia said she resigned voluntarily 3 weeks ago. I believe she's already taken a position at another firm. Emily absorbed this. She thought about Ryan, who had built his professional identity as carefully as he had built everything else. The title, the reputation, the salary, the corner office that he had talked about, as though it was proof of something. Emily thought about the title, the salary, the corner office, the reputation Ryan had polished like proof of who he was. Losing all of it at once was brutal. I didn't want that, she said. Patricia replied. I know, but you didn't cause it. You stopped protecting him from it. Emily sat with that sentence for a long time after hanging up. You stopped protecting him from it. She thought about the energy she had spent smoothing things over, covering gaps, being steady, and holding the shape of a life they were supposed to be building together. She thought about how invisibly she had managed the presentation of a marriage only one of them was truly in. She had been protecting him for years without knowing it. She was done. Later, with Dr. Okafor, she cried not for Ryan, but for the parts of herself she had spent on something false. Dr. Okafor said, grief is not always about losing something good. Sometimes it is about understanding the cost of what you endured. Emily wrote that sentence in her journal and read it back to herself that night before she slept. Then she put the journal down and slept without dreaming. January arrived, and with it the kind of clarity that cold weather sometimes brings. Everything sharper, the air thinner, the light coming at a lower angle that made the city look new. Emily officially accepted the senior director promotion on the 3rd of January. She signed the paperwork in Helen's office and shook Helen's hand and felt that particular solidity of a door opening rather than closing. She took her team to lunch to celebrate. They sat around a table at a restaurant she had chosen. Not Maison, not Meridian. Somewhere entirely new and entirely hers. And she looked around at the faces of the people she worked with and felt something that she had to pause to identify correctly, because it had been absent for long enough that it needed a moment to be recognized. Contentment. Simple, uncomplicated contentment. Right here in this room with these people doing this work in this life that was hers. She ordered the good wine. She proposed a toast. She said to doing the work. Everyone raised their glasses. Diane caught her eye across the table and mouthed. You good, Emily mouthed back. Yeah, I really am. It was true. The settlement was finalized in the 3rd week of January, earlier than Emily had expected, which meant Ryan's attorney had stopped fighting and accepted Patricia's terms with only minor adjustments. Emily received her fair share of the marital assets, supported by Gerald's accounting and the adultery documentation. The house sold. Ryan moved into an apartment across the city. The investment accounts were divided, and the retirement funds were protected. Patricia called it one of the cleaner resolutions she had seen in a case with this level of conflict. Emily signed the final papers in Patricia's office. When it was done, she sat with the pen still in her hand. Patricia asked how she felt. Emily said, like I can breathe. Patricia gathered the papers with the care of someone who had done this many times and still took it seriously. Then Patricia looked up and said, you handled this with remarkable grace. Emily, very few people manage it the way you did. Emily said, I had a good attorney. Patricia almost smiled. Yes, you did. But that is not what I mean. Emily understood. She nodded. She picked up her bag and she walked out of the office and she took the elevator down and walked out into the January afternoon. She stood on the sidewalk outside the building. She breathed in cold air. She thought, it's done. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel collapse. She felt light. Not the absence of weight, but a different kind of weight. She walked to her car, drove home, and stood on her balcony. That was where she was 8 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in March, when Daniel Foster called for the first time. She almost didn't know who he was when she saw the name on her phone. She had met Daniel briefly, very briefly, barely 20 minutes at a professional event in February. He was an architect there because one of the developers he worked with had an adjacent relationship to the marketing firm that was hosting. They had talked at the edge of the room, away from the main gathering, about something she could no longer quite reconstruct, work the city. Something about a building he was designing on the east side. He had been interesting in the unshowy way that people who are genuinely interested in ideas tend to be interesting. He had not tried too hard. He had not performed. He had just talked to her like she was a person he was glad to be talking to. And when someone had pulled her away toward a group conversation, he had said, "It was good to meet you, Emily," and meant it in the simple, uncomplicated way those words are usually not meant. She had given him her card. She had not thought about it much after. Now his name was on her phone on a Saturday morning in March. She answered. He said, Emily, it's Daniel Foster. We met at the Horizon event in February. I hope this isn't a strange call, she said. Not strange. Hi, he said. I've been thinking about calling for a few weeks and kept not doing it. And then I decided I was being ridiculous. So here I am. A brief pause. I was wondering if you'd want to get coffee sometime. Emily looked out at the city from her balcony. Can I ask you something first? She said. Daniel said yes. Why did you wait a few weeks? After a small silence, he answered honestly. I think I've sat with myself long enough. Emily said nothing for 3 seconds. This is a different kind of man, she thought. Coffee sounds good, she said. They met the following Thursday at a place near her office, clean and new, untouched by her old life. Daniel was already there when she arrived, which she noticed. I was reading something on his phone, and he looked up when she came in and stood up to greet her the way people who have genuine manners do automatically, without thinking about whether it will be noticed. They sat down. They ordered. They talked. She had expected it to feel effortful, expected to feel that particular weight of someone who has been hurt trying to be open again. The way you feel when you've had a bad fall and you're trying to convince your body that it's safe to move at full speed. It didn't feel like that. It felt surprisingly natural, like a conversation that was already in progress. He told her about the year he'd had, not in a way that was asking for sympathy, but in a way that was honest. Because she had asked, and he had answered truthfully. He had been with someone for 6 years. She had been unfaithful. He had spent a long time trying to fix something that she had already decided to leave. And he had eventually understood that the trying itself was the problem. Daniel said, at some point, you realize you have been standing in the doorway of a house the other person already left. You can keep standing there. Or you can close the door and go somewhere else. Emily asked, how do you know when you are ready? When you stop looking at the door, he said. Emily thought about that. I am not looking at the door, Daniel said. I know, I can tell. She asked how, he said. Because you walked in here and were completely present. You were not looking over your shoulder. You were not performing being okay. You were just here. Emily looked at him. You are very observant. Daniel smiled. Architects spend a lot of time watching how people move through spaces. You learn where someone's attention is. She lifted her coffee cup and felt something warm and simple move through her. Not crisis. Not numbness. Not survival. Something easier. The feeling of a door opening. Not the old one she had closed, but a new one in a wall she had not known was there. She thought, oh, so this is what it's supposed to feel like. They stayed for 2 hours. When they finally stood up to leave, he said, would you want to do this again? She said, yes, he said. Same time next week, she said. Same time next week. He smiled. She smiled back. She walked out into the March afternoon, and the air was cold and bright, and the city was doing its Thursday thing all around her, and she felt standing on the sidewalk outside a coffee shop, so completely, solidly, unambiguously herself, that she stopped walking for a second, just to feel the ground under her feet. Solid, completely solid. She called Claire on the way to her car. Claire said, how was it? Emily said, good, really good, Claire said. Define really good, Emily said. We're doing it again next week. Claire made a sound that was not quite a word, but communicated an enormous amount. Emily said, he is different. Claire, he was honest the whole time. He did not try to impress me or perform. He just sat there and talked to me like I was a person he genuinely wanted to know. Claire said, that is in fact the minimum requirement. Then she said softly, you deserve that. You deserve someone who just shows up and tells the truth. Emily said, I'm starting to believe that. Claire said, you should have believed it for years. Emily said, I know, but I believe it now. That's what matters. She got in her car. She sat for a moment before starting the engine. She thought about October, the receipt on the kitchen floor, the quiet of the house, the cold granite under her palms. She thought about the 20 minutes on the edge of the bathtub. She thought about her grandmother's voice. She thought about Patricia's office and Sandra's surveillance logs and the envelope delivered with 2 hands by a man who had worked at Meridian for 11 years and did not change his expression 1 degree. She thought about this note she had written in her own handwriting. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. She had made it every day since she had made it again in the apartment, in the work, in the therapy sessions with Dr. Okafor, in the morning coffee, on the balcony, in the journal, in the promotion, in the settlement. In every moment she had chosen to walk forward instead of looking back. Now she sat in a March parking lot, feeling the warmth of something beginning. It was real. It was hers. It had cost more than she would ever have chosen, but it had made her exactly who she was. She started the car and drove home. She made dinner in her own kitchen, in the life she had rebuilt from the rubble of a lie. The food was good. The evening was quiet. The city glowed outside her window, and in every way that actually mattered. She was free. At the edges, she heard the key in the door. Daniel, who had a key now, the way people who are real and present and honest eventually earned the right to a key, came in and found her where she always was at this hour, on the balcony, coffee in hand, watching the city. He came out and stood beside her. He did not speak immediately. That was one of the things she loved about him. He understood that some moments were meant to be lived in, not filled with words. After a while, he said, "Good day." She said, "Good day. Great day, actually." Patricia called. Emily said, "The final financial transfer cleared this morning. Everything is done. Completely. Permanently. Finally done." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "How does that feel?" She considered it honestly, the way she considered everything now, like I am standing exactly where I am supposed to be. He put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, not because she needed support, but because she wanted it. The city spread out before them, lit and alive. Emily thought, "A year ago I was holding a receipt on a kitchen floor. A year ago, everything I thought I had was false. A year ago, I lay beside a man who was lying to me and made a list in the dark." She had not waited to be rescued. She had not given him the satisfaction of watching her dissolve. She had gathered evidence, hired an attorney, moved her boxes, signed her lease, delivered the truth to a candlelit table across the city, and then walked away. She built something better, not perfect, real, and real. Emily Carter had learned, was worth more than perfect could ever be. She stood beside the man who told her the truth and looked over the city she had always loved. The last light moved across the skyline. She held all of it, the grief and the growth, the loss and the becoming, the woman she had been and the woman she was now. She held it without flinching, and she was completely, at last, without any remaining doubt, free.